In 1602, several merchants in Amsterdam came up with a trick to collect money from thousands of people in order to assemble a maritime expedition and travel to Asia to buy spices. This is how the world's first corporation was born and changed everything. When you hear this word, you think of names like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, or something like that. Very often, they are perceived as something sinister, as if corporations control politicians or even entire countries and want to control all people. Let's figure out what lies behind this word and how corporations are structured. Indeed, in a modern world, almost every large company is a corporation. They create products, influence the economy, and sometimes control entire markets, forcing entire countries to take their interests into account. But what is the difference between corporations and non-corporations? In earlier times, the classic business model was when a single entrepreneur owned a business. He had complete control and was also personally liable with his own assets for the company and its debts. This form of ownership has the status of a natural entity. Sometimes several partners would pool their capital to create a company and were jointly liable for the company's debts. This is called a general partnership. When we talk about liability for company debts, we mean that the owner or partners bear unlimited liability for the company's debts, and if their business goes bankrupt, their personal property, such as houses, apartments, or bank accounts, will be seized to repay the debt. This is the classic model on which most small businesses are still based today. These are not corporate forms of business. Now, let's take a company with a large number of owners, as the company sells its shares or stocks, thus attracting new partners. Participants or shareholders own a part of the company and its income in accordance with the percentage of shares or stocks acquired. This is already a corporation. The main difference between such a company is its legal status, legal entity. The purpose of this status is to separate the individual owners from the company itself. It can be said that the company becomes a kind of buffer zone between business activities and individual owners, a separate entity to which claims will be made if necessary.
But I just can't be personally responsible. That's one of the weaknesses of a partnership, isn't it, Sid?
Well, maybe you better incorporate the store.
Incorporate?
Yes. Incorporating would give you the big advantage of what you want right now. Limited liability. You start with a group of people who want to invest their money in a company. Then these people apply for a charter as a corporation. This government issues a charter to that corporation. Now that corporation operates legally as an individual person. It is not a group of people. It is under the law a legal person.
This means that shareholders are not liable for the company's debts with their personal assets. If the company goes bankrupt, they will only lose their shares. Thus, all businesses are divided into corporate and non-corporate entities. Non-corporate entities are companies with the legal status of a natural entity, which can be a sole proprietorship, general partnership, limited liability partnership, or limited liability company. The main features are one or a few owners without a separate legal entity. The owners are personally liable, with the exception of LLPs and LLCs, which are hybrids between non-corporations and corporations. These business forms are typically called firms, and they are well suited for family, partnership, or professional businesses, such as law or accounting firms. In contrast, corporate entities are companies that have legal entity status and are registered as corporations or incorporated. The main difference is that the company is divided into shares, so there are usually many owners. Also, shareholders are not liable for the company's debts with their personal assets. This form makes it easier to attract large investments compared to other forms of business. So companies for which attracting large investments is important choose this form. A corporation can be public or private. The main difference is that the shares of public companies are openly traded on stock exchanges and can be owned by millions of outsiders, while the shares of private corporations are owned by private investors and partners. Facebook started out as an LLP, but by 2004 it had become a private corporation, Facebook Incorporated. Large venture capitalists almost never invest in LLCs or partnerships. They want shares in a standard, understandable management structure, such as a board of directors.
Facebook, with a growing frenzy about the company's plans to finally go public to sell shares. Reports say the paperwork for an initial public stock offering could be filed in the next few days, a deal worth billions. Who knew your one Facebook profile way back then could now contribute to a financial windfall?
At the same time, Zuckerberg retained dual-class shares, where one share equals not 1, but 10 votes. In 2012, Facebook went public and became a public company. This allowed it to raise $16 billion in investments, with Zuckerberg retaining 22% of the shares, but 57% of the votes through dual-class shares. Other giants, such as Google and Amazon, followed the same path. As a rule, the corporate form is chosen by startups and other businesses that require large investments and have great potential for scaling and expanding their business. It is for this reason that corporations are associated with something huge. But this is not always the case. Sometimes they are medium-sized companies, but sometimes they are real giants. Abbreviations such as Inc., Corp., Company, Limited, AG, or simply company next to the company name will help you understand that it is a corporation. Also, when we refer to a corporation, it is 99% of the time a company that issues shares publicly or privately. Historically, corporations in the U.S. did not arise as a means of enriching individuals, but initially served to attract capital to risky public projects, such as the construction of bridges, canals, or roads. With the liberalization of legislation, it became easier for businessmen to register as corporations and conduct business in their own interests. The corporate form became widespread in the United States in the mid-19th century. This made it possible to attract billions in investments from hundreds of thousands of strangers. Thus, in the 1870s, John Rockefeller raised money for Standard Oil and became the first billionaire. Henry Ford was able to build a conveyor belt, and J.P. Morgan, having bought all the shares of U.S. Steel in 1901, created the world's largest company. This became a fundamentally new form of business when it became possible to buy not just shares in companies, but even entire companies, creating huge conglomerates and monopolies in the form of a single corporation. This is how the first railways, steel mills, and the oil and automotive industries were built in the early industrial era. But why wasn't this possible before? Well, the key issue was trust. In a classic business model, it is very difficult to attract new investment. Imagine that you have a small company that manufactures steam engines. You would be very cautious about bringing partners into your business, because from that moment on, you would be sharing management and bearing joint responsibility for the decisions of each participant. Accordingly, if your partner ran the business into the ground, you would also be liable for their debts. On the other hand, potential investors are also reluctant to invest their capital, risking losing everything by investing in a failing business. Therefore, family members or those who are trusted were usually taken on as partners. It is clear that such a model cannot accumulate huge investments that could be used to build entire industries. For this reason, limited liability for participants and the division of companies into shares were invented. How is a modern corporation structured? Formally, shareholders are at the top of the pyramid. They can be ordinary people who own shares in a corporation or other companies, especially various investment funds such as BlackRock or Vanguard. Every year, all shareholders elect a board of directors through electronic voting. Large shareholders usually gather and vote in person. But the system is based on the principle of one share, one vote, so the results of the vote usually depend on the votes of large funds. However, founders often retain shares with increased voting rights, B-class shares, which are equal to 10 ordinary shares. There are also C-class shares, which do not carry voting rights. Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, the Ford family, and other founders retain key voting rights thanks to these special shares. The elected board of directors, in turn, adopts the main development strategy, makes key decisions such as concluding major deals, paying dividends, acquiring or merging with other companies, and selects the CEO, the chief executive of the corporation. The CEO plays the role of a ship's captain, appointing a team of executives who manage the departments. If the board of directors believes that the CEO is not performing well, he or she is dismissed by vote. In essence, shareholders do not manage the company. This is done by special people, professional managers. Among other things, this gives corporations another advantage: immortality. In the case of an individual business or partnership, the death of one of the owners or their departure from the business can threaten the company's existence. In the case of a corporation, it is managed by higher managers, and shareholders can sell their shares, come and go over the course of centuries, while the company remains stable and does not lose investor confidence in its future. In short, corporations are created so that businesses can be divided into shares and attract large investments, while at the same time not bearing personal responsibility for their debts. It's like a shared cow that everyone owns and everyone gets a share of its milk, but at the same time, no one owns it individually.
Of course they make a profit, and it's a good thing. That's the incentive that makes capitalism work, to give us more of the things that we need. That's the incentive that other economic systems lack.
Transnational corporations are the largest corporations operating in several countries. They account for about 30% of global GDP and up to 50% of global exports. This means that a few thousand entities generate a third of all global activity, even though corporations account for up to 1% of the total number of businesses. Globalization only reinforces these processes. As large companies expand and small and medium-sized businesses are pushed out of the market, and we see the typical picture of a huge supermarket replacing a small family shop. Each of the top 100 companies, such as Walmart, Amazon, and others, has revenues that exceed the GDP of many countries.